Dear friends, today I will tell you the story of a girl who became a mother at just 12 years old. How did this happen? What happened to her? And who put her in this situation? We will reveal everything. Now, let's dive into the story of this brave girl and find out what happened to her. In a small town in Bangladesh, there lived a woman named Maria. She had two daughters, Alishba, the elder one, and Asifa, the younger one. Maria's life had taken a tragic turn when her husband, Irfan, passed away due to typhoid fever. Struggling with the loss, she moved back to her parents' house. But the burden of caring for her daughters grew heavier with time. Her parents, unable to support them any longer, suggested that Maria should remarry. They feared who would take care of her and her daughters after their passing. At first, Maria rejected the idea of a second marriage. She wanted to raise her daughters alone, relying on the memories of her late husband. But eventually, the pressure from her parents and the harsh reality of limited resources led her to agree. She remarried a man named Ali. Ali, despite his initial discomfort, embraced Maria's daughters as his own. He had a bag factory, and life began to stabilize again. Over time, Maria would tell Alishba, who was now 12, to take care of herself and Asifa. Alishba started managing the household chores while her younger sister looked up to her. Alishba had stopped going to school because there was no school in their town, but she attended tuition classes at the home of a local woman. One day, Ali suggested to Maria that Alishba should take the 8th grade exams and then enroll in a government school. Maria, eager for Alishba to continue her education, agreed. However, things started to change when Alishba went to stay with Ali's nephew, Cameron, in the city. Though she was there to study, Alishba found herself uncomfortable. Cameron, who was about 12 years older than her, began crossing boundaries. At first, it started with casual touches and unwanted attention. Despite Alishba's discomfort, she didn't have the courage to speak up. One evening, while everyone was away, Cameron's behavior escalated. Alishba, unable to bear it anymore, confided in her mother, Maria, over the phone. Maria reassured her daughter that it would soon be over. But the abuse continued. When Maria called Ali, he promised to bring her back. Maria, unaware of the full extent of what was happening, finally decided to bring Alishba back home. But things were about to take a dark turn. Alishba returned home, but the trauma she had experienced at Cameron's house lingered. She tried to push the memories aside, but every moment reminded her of the events that had unfolded. Her mother noticed that Alishba was not her usual self. She was quieter than before and often distant. Maria worried for her daughter and tried to console her, but Alishba remained withdrawn, unable to express what had happened. It wasn't long before Maria noticed that something was wrong physically as well. Alishba's body had changed, and she had become more tired and emotional. One evening, after Alishba fainted from exhaustion, Maria took her to the hospital. The doctor's diagnosis left Maria in shock. Alishba was pregnant. Maria's heart sank. She couldn't comprehend how this could have happened, and she felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She blamed herself for not protecting Alishba better. In her distress, she tried to keep Alishba calm, but the situation was unbearable. Maria held her daughter in her arms and wept, but she promised herself that she would find a way to get justice for Alishba, no matter the cost. Maria immediately confronted Ali, telling him everything she had discovered. Ali was stunned. His face turned pale with disbelief. He had no idea that Cameron had done such a thing to his stepdaughter. But instead of rushing to find a solution, Ali grew angry. He was furious with Maria for bringing this matter to light and upsetting the peace of the family. He even questioned Alishba's honesty, accusing her of fabricating the story. Maria, overwhelmed by her emotions, told Ali that she could no longer stay in the house with him. She pleaded for Alishba's well-being and demanded that Ali help her find a way to handle the situation. But Ali was firm in his stance. He told Maria that they could not let this incident ruin their reputation. He suggested that they quietly deal with the matter by having the baby aborted. Maria refused, knowing that terminating the pregnancy would be a dangerous option for someone as young as Alishba. Maria knew that if they didn't act quickly, Alishba's future would be compromised forever. After much thought, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She contacted a lawyer and began the process of filing a case against Cameron for what he had done to Alishba. But the family's pressure was relentless. Ali's side of the family, especially his sister, made it clear that they didn't want to be involved in the scandal. They even went so far as to disown Alishba, saying that they would not let the child stay under their roof. Maria's determination grew stronger with every passing day. She had faced the loss of her husband, the responsibility of raising 2 daughters, and now the betrayal of someone she trusted. But this was different. This was her daughter's future at stake. Maria swore to get justice, no matter what it took. As the days passed, Maria's determination only grew stronger. She knew that if Cameron was not held accountable for his actions, Alishba's future would be forever tarnished. Maria's decision to take legal action was met with fierce opposition from Ali and his family. They pressured her to back down, saying that the shame this scandal would bring upon the family was unbearable. They even threatened to disown her if she continued to pursue the case. But Maria was resolute. Her daughter needed justice, and she would stop at nothing to ensure that Cameron paid for what he had done. While Maria sought legal counsel, Cameron, unaware that Maria was preparing to expose him, continued to live his life as though nothing had happened. He dismissed the accusations, claiming that Alishba had been lying. He even tried to turn the tables on Maria, accusing her of manipulating the situation. His arrogance grew with each passing day, and he was convinced that no one would believe Maria's claims over his own. Maria's heartache intensified as she realized how much her daughter had suffered and how alone she felt. Alishba, still a child herself, had been forced to endure the trauma of sexual assault and now faced the consequences of that trauma, an unplanned pregnancy that she had no way of understanding, let alone coping with. Maria knew that Alishba needed more than just legal action. She needed emotional support and, most of all, her mother's unwavering love. Maria began making plans to take Alishba far away, to a place where they could escape the suffocating judgment of their town and Ali's family. She dreamed of a fresh start, where Alishba could heal and live her life without the constant reminder of the horrors she had endured. But that dream was shattered when Maria's world was turned upside down by a chilling phone call. One night, as Maria sat in her room, the phone rang. It was Ali. His voice was cold and detached as he told her that he could no longer stand by her side. He blamed Maria for the disruption she had caused in their family and for the shame that had been brought upon them. He told her that he was done with her and Alishba, that he no longer wanted to be a part of their lives. "You're on your own now," Ali said before hanging up. Maria felt a wave of shock and disbelief wash over her. How could the man she had trusted and married abandon her at this critical moment? How could he turn his back on the very daughter he had promised to care for? But there was no time to dwell on his betrayal. Maria knew she had to be strong for Alishba. Now, more than ever, she needed to protect her daughter from a world that seemed to have turned against them. Meanwhile, Cameron had continued to spread lies about Alishba, claiming that she was the one who had come onto him. He tried to paint her as the villain, manipulating the situation to make himself appear innocent. His words echoed through the small town, and many people started to doubt Maria and her daughter. The pressure mounted, and Maria found herself more isolated than ever before. But she refused to back down. She was not going to let her daughter's voice be silenced. Maria made the painful decision to confront Cameron, to force him to admit what he had done. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was willing to face anything. One day, Maria went to Cameron's house with Alishba by her side. When Cameron saw them standing at his door, a look of guilt flashed across his face, but he quickly masked it with arrogance. He pretended that nothing had happened, but Maria could see through his facade. She knew the truth, and now it was time for him to face it. "Cameron," Maria said, her voice trembling with rage, "you have ruined my daughter's life. You have taken away her innocence, and you will answer for what you did." Cameron, in his typical defiant manner, tried to laugh it off. "What are you going to do, Maria? No one will believe you. You're just a desperate woman looking for someone to blame." But Maria was no longer afraid. She pulled out her phone and began playing the recording she had made of Cameron admitting his guilt. Cameron's face turned pale as he realized that the truth had finally caught up with him. "You think you can intimidate me?" Cameron snarled, but his voice shook with fear, not intimidation. "No, Cameron," Maria replied, her voice steady. "Just the truth." At that moment, Maria knew there was no turning back. She had exposed Cameron for the monster he was, and now it was time to face the consequences. But as she looked at her daughter, she realized that this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. After the confrontation, Maria felt a sense of relief for the first time in a long while. She had stood up for her daughter and had exposed Cameron for what he truly was. But the relief was short-lived. The legal battle was far from over, and the path to justice was filled with obstacles. The news of Cameron's crimes spread like wildfire in the town, and Maria was subjected to harsh judgment. Many people, including those who had once been her friends, turned their backs on her. They whispered behind her back, calling her daughter a liar and accusing Maria of causing a scandal. The townspeople who had once looked up to her now shunned her, treating her like an outcast. Maria tried to ignore their gossip, but it hurt. She had always been a proud and strong woman, but now she felt small and helpless. Despite the social isolation, Maria remained determined. She knew that if she gave up now, Alishba's pain would be in vain. She had to keep fighting, not just for Alishba's future, but for the truth to be heard. With the recording of Cameron admitting his guilt, Maria went to the police and filed a formal complaint. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Cameron had powerful connections, and his family had already started to exert pressure on the authorities. As Maria fought for justice, Ali's betrayal continued to haunt her. He had left her to handle everything on her own, and his indifference only made things worse. Maria tried to reason with him, but Ali remained distant and cold. He no longer wanted to be involved in the matter, and every attempt she made to talk to him was met with rejection. He even began to question her actions, implying that maybe Alishba had exaggerated the events to get attention. His lack of support made Maria feel more alone than ever. But Maria's resolve remained unshaken. She had learned to rely on herself, and she would not allow anyone, not even Ali, to stop her from seeking justice for her daughter. The legal proceedings were slow, and Cameron's family was doing everything they could to protect him. They tried to discredit Maria and Alishba, calling the case a family dispute and downplaying the severity of Ali's actions. They bribed officials, manipulated witnesses, and created a web of lies to cover up the truth. Maria, feeling the pressure mounting, sought help from a lawyer who was willing to stand by her side. The lawyer, who had seen many cases like this, assured Maria that they would fight until the end. With his help, Maria gathered more evidence and testimonies from people who had seen Cameron's inappropriate behavior in the past. Slowly, the case began to gain traction. Alishba, still deeply affected by the trauma, had become more withdrawn. She would often sit in silence, staring at nothing, her mind replaying the horrific events. Maria tried to comfort her, but Alishba felt disconnected from everything, including her mother. The bond that they once shared seemed to be slipping away. Maria knew that her daughter needed more than just legal action. She needed emotional healing. But the reality was that their lives had been turned upside down, and there was no way to undo what had been done. As the days went by, the stress began to take its toll on Maria. She would often stay up late reviewing the case documents and planning her next steps. She knew that every move she made had to be calculated, and every piece of evidence had to be carefully presented. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. One day, as Maria sat in her small living room, exhausted and drained from the constant battle, she received a call from her lawyer. The police had finally taken action against Cameron, and he was being arrested. Maria's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. That evening, Maria sat with Alishba and told her the news. Alishba, who had been so distant, suddenly looked up. Her eyes were wide with surprise, and a faint smile appeared on her face, but it quickly faded. She was still too hurt, still too scared by everything that had happened. Maria held her daughter's hand and said, "This is not just about the legal victory, Alishba. This is about you, about your future. You deserve to heal, to live without the shadow of what happened hanging over you. We will fight together, and we will make sure he never hurts anyone again." The case was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Maria allowed herself to believe that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. The arrest of Cameron was a turning point in Maria's fight for justice. But even as the law began to take its course, the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Cameron's family, especially his mother, was determined to discredit Maria and her daughter at every turn. They began to accuse Alishba of being promiscuous, claiming that she had seduced Cameron and that the whole story was fabricated to ruin their family's reputation. Maria, despite the constant barrage of lies, refused to back down. She knew the truth, and she was determined to make sure that Cameron was held accountable for his actions. The pressure from Cameron's family only made her more resolute. She couldn't allow their manipulations to succeed. But Maria also had to deal with the emotional toll the situation was taking on Alishba. The young girl who had once been full of life had withdrawn into herself. She would hardly speak, and when she did, it was always about the trauma she had endured. Maria tried everything she could think of to help Alishba heal. She took her to counseling, spent hours talking with her, and tried to create a sense of normalcy in their chaotic lives. But Alishba remained distant, lost in her own pain. Maria knew that no matter what, she had to be strong for her daughter. She couldn't afford to break down, not now. But as the days wore on, she felt herself becoming emotionally drained. She would cry quietly at night, thinking about everything that had happened and wondering if things would ever be the same again. But each time she wiped away her tears, she reminded herself why she was doing this. For Alishba, for justice, for the future. The trial began soon after, and Cameron was formally charged with sexual assault. Maria took the stand, recounting the horrors her daughter had faced. The defense team tried to tear apart her testimony, accusing her of being a desperate mother trying to save face. They even went so far as to suggest that Maria had coached Alishba into lying about Cameron. The courtroom was filled with tension as both sides presented their arguments. But Maria stood her ground. She knew that the truth was on her side, and no amount of deflection or lies could change that. Alishba, despite her trauma, was also called to testify. The thought of speaking in front of a room full of strangers terrified her, but Maria encouraged her to speak her truth. "You don't have to be afraid," Maria whispered to her. "I'm right here with you. You are strong, Alishba, and your voice matters." When Alishba finally took the stand, her voice was soft and shaky, but her words were clear. She spoke of the nights she had spent in fear, the feelings of helplessness and confusion. She spoke of Cameron's manipulation and abuse and how she had tried to tell her mother, but didn't have the words. For the first time in months, Alishba's eyes sparkled with something other than sadness. It was a flicker of hope, a sign that she might be able to reclaim some part of herself. The trial continued for several weeks, and the case was slowly building up against Cameron. His arrogance began to falter as more evidence came to light. Witnesses who had seen him act inappropriately with Alishba, medical records confirming her pregnancy, and, of course, the damning phone recording where he had admitted his guilt. Cameron's defense team tried to counter each piece of evidence, but the truth was undeniable. But even as Cameron's fate seemed sealed, Maria faced a new challenge. The pressure from her community and her own family began to mount. People started to question her motives, accusing her of destroying her own family for the sake of revenge. Maria heard whispers in the streets. People called her a bad mother for putting her daughter through such a public ordeal. Some even blamed her for Alishba's pregnancy, saying that she had failed as a mother and had allowed this to happen. Each comment, each judgment, felt like a blow to Maria's heart. But she knew that these people didn't understand the truth. They didn't understand what it was like to watch her child suffer in silence, to see them lose their innocence at the hands of someone they trusted. Maria knew that she could never stop fighting for Alishba, no matter how much the world turned against them. As the trial reached its conclusion, Maria felt a mix of emotions: fear, hope, anger, and determination. Cameron's guilt seemed undeniable, but there was always the fear that he would somehow escape justice. Maria couldn't allow herself to believe that. She had come too far, and she had fought too hard for this moment. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. Maria sat in the courtroom, her heart racing as the judge prepared to announce Cameron's fate. She held Alishba's hand tightly, offering her the comfort of her presence. They had come this far together, and no matter what happened next, they would face it as a team. The courtroom fell silent as the judge prepared to announce his decision. Maria's heart pounded in her chest, and Alishba, though fearful, held her mother's hand tightly. The judge read the verdict, and the words that followed felt like a weight lifted from Maria's shoulders. Cameron was found guilty of sexual assault. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. His reputation was shattered, and his actions were finally exposed to the world. Maria and Alishba, though relieved, knew that justice was just one step in their long journey toward healing. As Cameron was escorted out of the courtroom, Maria felt a mix of emotions. She had fought hard for this moment, but the scars left on her daughter and herself would take much longer to heal. However, there was a sense of closure. Cameron had paid for his crimes, and they could begin to rebuild their lives. But the journey was far from over. Maria knew that the true healing would come from within. She promised Alishba that they would start anew, that the past would no longer define them. It was a difficult path ahead, but Maria's resolve had never been stronger. She would protect her daughter, and together, they would find peace. With Cameron's conviction, Maria and Alishba finally found a sense of justice. However, the emotional scars remained. Maria moved with Alishba to a new town, away from the painful memories of their past. Slowly, Alishba began to heal, supported by her mother's unwavering love and care. Over time, Alishba regained her confidence and enrolled in a new school. Maria found a job that allowed her to provide for her daughter, and together, they rebuilt their lives. Although the trauma lingered, they learned to live again, free from the shadows of the past. Maria realized that her fight for justice had not only been for Alishba, but for herself as well. It had given her strength, resilience, and the courage to create a better future for them both. The bond between mother and daughter grew stronger, and they found hope in the possibility of a new, brighter chapter. So, dear friends, if this story inspired you or gave you chills, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends, and if you want more powerful and emotional stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss an update. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below about this story, and if you enjoyed this story, give it a big thumbs up. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that touch hearts and inspire change. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.